Let's see if we can get an idea of what's going on inside President Putin's head. Mikhail Kasyanov was Prime Minister of Russia from 2000 to 2004 during President Putin's first administration. He's now with the opposition People's Freedom Party in Russia. Welcome to DW, sir. You know the president well. What do you think the purpose of this invasion is?
Thank you for having me in the program. I think this is completely different Putin. In fact, before Monday, I believed and I thought that Mr. Putin was bluffing, trying to get concessions from the West on just those, I would say, imagined security threats, etc. For a few months, those negotiations, and he wanted to have pictures just shaking hand of President Biden and other European leaders. And on Monday, when I watched TV and Mr. Putin's speech on the meeting of the Security Council, and later his strange lecture with the full contradictions and imagined history stories, I understood that something wrong with the. I think just Mr. Putin is out of a normal mind. And in fact, what is happening today, it's absolutely disaster. It's disaster that is, I would say, violation of international law. Just no one could expect such a violation, no, such a disaster.
Right. The fear before this happened was that if it happened, Mr. Putin would not stop at Donetsk and Luhansk and would go for the whole of the country. Now the fear must be that perhaps he won't even stop at Ukraine.
Right now, you're correct. It's an absolutely unpredictable situation. Nobody can predict what Mr. Putin thinks right now and what his ambition is at the moment. In fact, you know, just there is such kind of explanation that he wants to restore so-called Nova-Russia, which is Mala-Russia, Mala-Russia, which was light in a couple of centuries ago from Donbas to Odessa, so that and Ukraine has no access to the Black Sea. That is, maybe this is the idea at the moment, as we see in Kherson, which is another part, southern part of Ukraine. Russian tanks are there, and people already complaining that they didn't expect just that so quickly those tanks would appear. It means Mr. Putin going further on to Odessa and Transnistria. There's very dangerous development taking place right now.
With our 2020 hindsight, what do you think? Could this have been prevented if the West, the EU, the NATO, the US had taken tougher action previously?
Previously, I don't think that would prevent, because Mr. Putin just explained that they're prepared. In fact, you can imagine that Mr. Putin and his inner circle, they are prepared to live in isolation. They all came from the Soviet Union, as many of us, and they were in KGB. And KGB was an elite organization, and they lived in very well conditions. And right now, they believe they will survive the same way. They don't care about Russian people and just the whole situation in Russia. They're thinking about themselves. They're prepared for isolation. But I don't think they realized how difficult it will be if those harsh sanctions, which were explained previously by American and European leaders, would be exposed. That will be disaster for economy, and if foreign exchange inflow would stop coming into Russia, it means just dramatic devaluation of ruble. It means absolutely growing poverty every day. It means growing negative attitude to Mr. Putin within a short period of time.
All right. Well, let's pick up that point. Then let's hear from the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, talking about sanctions.
Let me be very clear. It is President Putin who will have to explain this to his citizens. I know that the Russian people do not want this war. The European Union and NATO have worked in close complementarity, and this crisis will bring us even closer together. It is our shared duty to stand up to the gravest act of aggression on European soil since decades.
Mikhail Kasyanov, you and Ursula von der Leyen both made the same point that this will lead to unrest amongst the Russian people. But we have a Russian president who has been in power long enough that he knows which levers to pull and he can keep his people down. So this isolation that you talk about, that you think that you say that will not bother him but will bother the Russian people, will he be bothered by their response?
People would understand that they already have nothing to lose. Ordinary people, which is more than 50% of population, which live in very poor conditions. And just the poverty is 20 million people, just people who live under the level, appropriate level of living. And these people would start understanding that, will start to understand what's going on, why just Russia, such a rich country, and having such big problems, and they cannot survive. Middle class in the big cities already started to protest, and some people already were arrested and put in jail just during the day. That we already see reports from Moscow and St. Petersburg, and for example. And I think that will be growing unrest of people, not immediately, but during a short period of time, with absolutely mature, a clear vision who is responsible for all those problems, who is guilty, where the source of all danger for Russian people is. I think they will clearly would understand. And with our help of my party, People's Freedom Party, although we are under pressure right now and we cease to exist this year because just government already just announced that we should be closed very soon because we're in cooperation with so-called undesirable organization abroad. It means our parties in European Union, just with whom we cooperate very closely because we have common values, and we will be close very soon. We already made those statements, of course, this morning and yesterday. And we realized just how difficult for people will be to accept what is going on and how difficult will be to overcome when the sanctions will be exposed. But
so just okay, no, we've got that. Let me just butt in there and just talk about this process, because this looks like it's going to be a very long, drawn-out process. You have the invasion, which has now started. You have international leaders talking about sanctions. They have then to agree them, and the EU is not quick to do that, as an example. They have to agree them, they have to implement them, then they have to bite, during which time Russia becomes more and more embedded in whichever bits of Ukraine, or indeed the whole country, it has taken. So we are talking about months in this process before we see sanctions actually working, aren't we?
It's not a question for me, I think, just because it's European leaders should decide just how fast and how harsh, how strong those sanctions should be, what other response is, because there is no any instrument in their hands. But in fact, if I can tell you that if the sanctions will touch oil and gas sector, that will be immediate effect within a couple of months. Because just foreign exchange will not come to Russia, and it means there will be a huge pressure to ruble. It means just devaluation of national currency. It means just no access for international foreign markets. It means just Russian banking system cannot finance anything. It means printing money. It means hyperinflation. It means disaster and unrest on the streets.
So that's a response to Russia. What about a response for Ukraine? Is there anything more that the West could be doing for Ukraine?
I think the rest should reconsider all was going on and is going around Ukraine since 2014, and the West should recall that there is so-called Budapest Memorandum, where United States and Great Britain promised to Ukraine to protect and to respect territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country. A part of those economic sanctions, I think just there is a global security threat. And I think just violation of international law, violation of all those agreements in Budapest Memorandum in particular, it's a serious issue. I think Ukrainian government already called members of Budapest Memorandum to set up a special discussion and think about this, how to tackle this threat which appeared just yesterday.
Understood. Thank you, and very clear, sir. Thank you for joining us, former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov.
Thank you.
Well, Vladimir Putin announced this invasion as UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres was speaking at an emergency session of the UN Security Council and urging the Russian president to give peace a chance. Mr. Putin's televised late-night address came shortly after self-proclaimed separatist leaders in eastern Ukraine asked him for military support. This attack is the culmination of a series of escalations that began on Monday when President Putin recognised the independence of two regions in eastern Ukraine, including territory controlled by Kyiv.
I'm addressing the Ukrainian army. Please lay down your arms. Your granddads and your great-grandfathers did not fight the Nazis and defend our common fatherland so that neo-Nazis would seize power in Ukraine. You made an oath to serve the Ukrainian people. They are a fascist junta who have seized power. They're plundering Ukraine and exploiting its people. Don't fulfill their criminal orders. Lay down your weapons and go home.
Let me take you back to Ukraine now. We'll speak to Andrea Yeska, who's a journalist. She's in the Donbas region in Ukraine's east. She joins us on the line from Pokrovsk in Donetsk. Welcome to DW, Andrea. Explain to us geographically where you are and what you can see, what's been happening.
Yeah, we are in Pokrovsk now. We left the industrial town of Avdiivka this morning. We came to Avdiivka about 3 days ago, and the situation was quite calm, astonishingly calm, because we talked to a lot of people there, asking them what they expect, and everybody said, oh, they are expecting nothing. They did not expect to be invaded, and they were so calm, saying, you know, we've had violence here and shellings for 8 years, so this situation is not any different for us. Just yesterday we went to the hospital to ask if they are taking any preparations for the worst case, and they said no, there was nothing, no blood, no transfusion, just nothing, no food, no water in the cellar. And then also last night we talked to people and they said no, everything is calm, everything is okay. And this morning the town woke up to the war, and people started going to work, started walking their dogs, and were quite calm. But during the day, everything started deteriorating. It became very extreme. The shellings came very close. There was artillery fire within the outskirts of the city already. And the people are expecting that the Russian army will take the city today, tomorrow, but in the very, very near future. And people started panicking later on and started to leave, packing their cars. And that was quite surprising, because in the morning everybody had still told us, no, we are not going, everything will be fine. And then in the afternoon it seemed like it was trickling into the minds of the people that this is a dangerous situation.
And where are they going? Do you know?
Yeah, well, one man said he would go to Prague because he has a son. Then there were a few people who said they want to go to Kiev, and then others were contradicting them and said, no, don't go to Kiev. We heard it's under fire already. So they were saying, yeah, but what should we do? We don't have any other place to go, or our children are there. And the problem for many people is that this region has been so poor throughout all the years, and that people do not have the money to move out and live somewhere else, because apartments anywhere else are much too expensive for them. And what we also heard from a lot of people was that they are really, really glad that the Russian army is coming. A lot of them said, well, then finally it's going to be over, because we've lived with violence for such a long time. It was so terrible. And then there was a lot of disappointment in the EU and the West and the American politics, saying you left us alone, you said this is a frozen conflict, but it was a war all along, you called it contact line, but it was a front line, and we were dying and we are poor, and why should we be with you? We are very happy that Putin is coming and finally liberating us.
There were a couple of... I'd like to explore that idea that you mentioned there of relief. So, because on the one hand, you seem to be saying that people were relieved to see the Russians, and other people relieved that, well, at least we have an end to all the uncertainty.
Yes, that's true. I think this end is very important, even for people who are not pro-Russia or pro-separatists. The people are just so tired. We have been in Ukraine last year around this time, a little later, and we talked to them then, and already then they said, we are so tired. We do not know how to live under these circumstances anymore. I mean, you must imagine there are families raising their kids for 8 years now, directly on the front line in these villages, families who are too poor to leave the village. And the mothers have a bad conscience because they think they are not protecting their children properly. The children go to the school bus and you never know whether they come back because they have the mortars and everything and artillery all the time. And children got killed and they got hit, and you have the snipers somewhere. You have to cross the street in the village from one side to another to visit your neighbor, but you are right in the view of the sniper there. And you never know if he is in a bad mood that day or decides that he's going to kill you. And that was terrible for the people.
And this has all been going on in the last year before we reached this terrible climax. You also talked there about their sense of disappointment in the reactions from the West, from the United States, from the United States and from the European Union.
Yeah, well, it's not the reaction now. It's the reaction throughout all these 8 years that have passed since 2014. Because after that, they have the feeling nobody was interested in the conflict in Ukraine anymore. Europe and the Americans declared it as somehow solved through the Minsk Treaty, but for the people it was not solved. And they said, yeah, you didn't look at us throughout all these years. Where were you? Now you come and you get all hysteric about it all. But this was our life all these years, and you never noticed it. And you didn't come to help us. This is what they say, and I do understand their point. I mean, if I lived there, maybe I would also see it like that.
That sounds desperate. We thank you for joining us and just painting that picture for us. Andrea Ieska, who's reporting from the Donbas region in Ukraine's east. Thank you for joining DW.